Operation Rosa Parks. We have to make sure we keep history in order.
Can I help you?
Are we actually leaving? Not in a million years.
Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel and my weekly Doctor Who reviews, where I rush upstairs after watching the episode and try and get my thoughts down for you people at home that care about them. Yeah, this is... I've got a lot of thoughts about this episode, and I don't really know where to start. We're talking about Rosa, the third episode of the 11th series of New Who. It was written by Mallory Blackman and Chris Chibnall, and I don't know if this is just something he's doing with all of his guest writers, that he is a credited writer on all of the guest writers, or if it's just for this one. I'm not entirely sure, but it is this time, and it was directed by Mark Tonderi. Mark Tonderi? I think I pronounced that right. Sorry, Mark, if I haven't. Point of order, point of house cleaning, as it was. Last week, I credited last week's episode to Jamie Child's directing, and as was pointed out to me multiple times in the comment section, it was actually Mark who directed this episode, also directed last week's episode, so all of my praise about last week's episode's direction, which I gave to Jamie, belongs to Mark. I had to clarify that here. I said I would in the comments, and I have. So, sorry, Mark. So why not, let's start with that then. Let's start with the direction, because we're talking about it already. The direction on this episode was fantastic, as it has been throughout this series so far. It's difficult because they've got new lenses, they've got this new cinematic style of filming, and it is quite difficult to know when you're watching it how much of this is the direction that I think looks amazing, and how much of it is just the better cameras. And I think it's probably a mixture of both. I think the direction, there has absolutely been fantastic shots in all three of the episodes so far. So the two directors that have directed the 3 episodes so far, clearly know what they're doing with these lenses, and they clearly know how to film some really cinematic shots with them. And it's not just the technology which is making it look good. What I really love about this episode is it's sort of grasping this setting fully with the direction, and that goes right down into the sort of the sort of color grade that's put on it. It's got a slight sort of sepia feel to it. It's quite subtle, but it's there. The kind of brown hues and stuff are all in there, which I think is really nice, because if you think of like film from that time, photography from that time, you think it's got this sort of slightly sepia element to it, slightly muted colours, and I think that's been brought in nicely for this episode, and that ties in nicely to the setting. Now, this episode had, I think it's fair to say, a lot of people nervous before it aired. It's a very delicate subject. It's certainly an issue which is still very prevalent, not in the same way as obviously it was in the 1950s, but in other ways. And I think across the spectrum, there were people that were maybe making assumptions about this episode. There was the people that were saying, well, is it going to be too preachy? Is it going to be ramming an, let's get those air quotes out, agenda down our throats? But equally, on the other side of things, there were people that were going, is this going to be done sensitively? Is this going to be done this is not an American writing this, and there are sensitivities involved in the whole America and racism aspect, that if you're not an American, if you're not a black American writing it, are you going to be able to tap into that in the same way that a black American might be able to, and give that perspective? Now, obviously, Mallory Blackman herself is black, but she's black British, so it's a slightly different experience. So there were both of those concerns, but I think the episode skirted it all perfectly. And by skirted it, I don't mean like skirted around it and avoided it. It tackled the issue head on. It tackled the era head on. And I think it did a really good job of feeling like an engaging... Well, it was. Of being an engaging drama about that period while not shying away from presenting the nastier elements of it. Now, despite what some newspaper headlines would have us believe, this is not the first time that Doctor Who has tackled racism. It tackles racism quite a lot in many different ways over the years. You know, the very second serial was about the Daleks, who are all about racial purity. So Doctor Who has tackled racism in many different forms, whether that be metaphor or allegory, or sometimes even directly head on. You had in remembrance of the Daleks, they had a no coloured sign, and you obviously had the 12th Doctor punching the racist that made the racist remark to Bill in 1800s, I want to say, Britain. I can't remember when that was set. Whenever the Thames froze over, I forget the dating on that one, but they has been tackled before, but I don't think ever so directly, and ever so... What's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know. Not directly or in a way that isn't scared to show it in such as a focus of the episode. This episode is very real, it's very visceral, it doesn't shy away from genuine human emotions related to these issues and reactions to these issues. As much as, it was amusing to see the 12th Doctor punch that racist in Thin Ice, it was one line, it was an overdone reaction, deliberately overplayed, which was fine, and it fitted for the 12th Doctor's era, and in fact for most, of modern Who. But we're in a new era now where characterization, Chris Chibnall, and I think it's a brilliant thing, has brought in this brilliant, realistic characterization of his human characters, and this episode is a perfect example of that. We didn't get any just like over-the-top reactions. We got what felt like real reactions by people that were thrown into these situations. Like Ryan, for instance, you could really see on his face the sort of restraint that he was having to put himself under to not punch that guy in the face, like the 12th Doctor might have. And the way the Doctor was treading very carefully between... She knows that she can't interfere with history too much, especially around this. So, in fact, their whole premise of the episode is not interfering with history and trying to keep history on track. So she's very much like, okay, this is awkward and we apologise, it's terrible, but we've got to tread carefully with what we do. And just some of the looks on her faces, the looks on Ryan, the look on all of their faces as they react to this felt very real. And the whole episode didn't shy away from showing the era as it actually was, and the kind of racism that you got in everyday situations, from being on a bus to, walking to the no coloured signs in motels, to police officers and how they would react. And it didn't shy away from any of that. And I thought that was a really important that they didn't, and it showed... It was very educational in that way for how the era was. Talking of educational, this is nice. This is probably the closest we're going to get to a pure historical, because the historicals of the Hartnell era are a bygone thing. We probably won't get them again, where there is no aliens, no sci-fi elements apart from the TARDIS crew. We're not going to probably see that again. But this is probably the closest we've got to it, because you had the guy from the future, but he was human. And you had a bit of technology going around that he had, but that was it. And most of the episode was focused on the historical elements and dealing with the period of time they found themselves in. And I thought that was brilliant. One of the original remits of the programme was back in the 1960s to be educational, and I have no doubt that people will come away from this episode slightly more informed about the period, and also that they will come away probably wanting to know more about the period. I do. I'm intrigued to find out more now, especially around that particular events that are portrayed here and immediately afterwards. So I think this does a really good job about harkening back. Another one of the things that Russell, I was going to say Russell, that's not Russell, about Chibnall has said is that he wants to harken back to some of the elements from the original 60s show, and this is another good way of doing it. We get some nice educational content that doesn't feel like it's a lesson. It's still just an engaging drama, but while you're enjoying the engaging entertainment of the drama, you're also learning stuff. And I think that's brilliant, and I'm really glad the show is getting sort of including that once more. If they could include it in the science elements as well, like they used to as well, that would be even better. Let's get some science education in there as well, so that we're learning about science. Whole episodes where we're learning about science, but not really realising we're learning about science because we're being entertained at the same time. I want more of that. I like that. Another thing I have to praise this episode for, we finally got some development from Yaz, because it's quite a wide criticism, I think, that Yaz hasn't really got much development over the last 2 episodes. She's sort of been the third or fourth, maybe in this case, wheel, and as a companion, we've been hoping that there's been something coming, and I think there's more stuff to come from her, because looking at the episode synopsises coming up, there are a couple of episodes which focus quite heavily on her family. The next episode indeed has her relatives in it, and then we've got an episode with her grandmother as a young girl in it coming up as well. So I think we're going to get more from Yaz, but I think we got our first glimpses of a bit of character development for her in this episode. We got some nice interaction with Rosa that sort of started to give us that sort of look a bit more into her personality, into what drives Yaz, and just generally who she is as a person. I think we got a little bit of that from her interaction with Rosa, which was really nice. We also got a bit of development of her within the team, because the last couple of episodes we've had a lot of stuff about Ryan and Graham's relationship and how that looks like it's going to be developing. What we got in this episode was a bit of Yaz and Ryan. In fact, there was even, I would say, a little bit of flirting, which heightens a previous theory of mine that I think they're going to end up as a couple at some point. But it was nice to see some development from Yaz at last. The characterization, as I mentioned earlier, just in this whole series so far has been brilliant. Everyone feels really real. The reactions are real. When Graham was talking about Grace, there was a moment where sort of caught in his throat when he was talking about the t-shirt she had. You could just see the sort of pain of remembering. You could just see it on his face. This isn't a series now that has big grand speeches to reveal things. It's those little moments, and they're really nice little moments, and I'm loving the characterization and how real the companions are feeling. It won't be to everyone's taste, because some people like the sort of more escapist, big sort of overplayed characters that have more, not your more realistic reactions to things, but, a bit more over the top in a way. But some people prefer that, but I'm really, really liking the kind of more gritty, in a way, sort of British drama feel to this. I'm trying to keep this as short as possible. I know I'm already going quite long, so let's talk about the guest stars very quickly. Vinette Robinson, I thought, was brilliant as Rosa Parks. She was engaging, she was warm, she seemed like a really nice character, and I was engaged pretty much every scene she was on. Just from, the way she would stare down the bus driver in some scenes, just the looks she could give people and reveal so much. I thought she is a brilliant actress, and not the first time she's been in Doctor Who. She was in actually another previously Chris Chibnall written episode, 42, back in the David Tennant era. She was in that, so I'm very glad she's back. She did a fantastic job here. And the guy that played Krasko, the bad guy, Josh, is it Brownman? Josh Brownman. Oh, I've forgotten. Sorry. Josh, anyway. Josh, he was good. I thought he played it very... it wasn't a particularly massively developed villain, and if there's one criticism of the series so far, it might be that the villains haven't been massively developed, but I think the stories surrounding them are so strong that it hasn't mattered massively, and I don't think it matters massively here, for two reasons. I think the plot itself, and the story wasn't about the villain, he was more a plot point, and that's fine, but it would be nice to get some more developed villains coming up. I think if we keep getting this, it's going to start to get a bit annoying. At the moment, it's not bothering me because the rest of the episode was so strong, and even the bits he was in were so strong. He was good in the part, so I don't think it necessarily needed him to be a massively developed villain. But I can kind of see where people are coming from, where they're saying the villains aren't massively developed. I can kind of get, because when you get a really nicely developed villain, it's really good. However, I don't think you need it every time. I think the story is strong enough without it. He played it nicely. He was smarmy. He was kind of had that sort of cocky arrogance, smarmy suave at the same time. I think he played it really well, and I don't think. Well, we'll come to that in prediction corner. I keep on saying we'll come back to stuff. I hope I actually remember to. But no, he was good in terms of the plot of him. I think, as I said, I like the fact that it felt almost like a pure historical, and I think if he'd been in it any more than he was, I think it would have started to feel slightly less like that. So I liked sort of seeing the only sort of one or two scenes where he's confronted, and then like seeing him trying to tinker around with things in a very light way in the background. I'm a bit torn actually about whether or not I feel he should have been in it more, or it was just right. I think I'm veering to it was just the right amount. What else? Quickly mention there were some nice continuity nods. We got Storm Cage mentioned. That's where he had gotten out of, this villain, which is of course where River Song was incarcerated, and he had a vortex manipulator like the time agents do. People had clocked onto that in advance and anticipated that he might have been a time agent, but it doesn't look like that. It looks like he just sort of bartered and traded for it. So they were nice little continuity nods there that I quite liked as well. So overall, yeah, this I thought was a fantastic episode. It's actually my favourite episode of the series so far, of Series 11. So I'm going to give it... I didn't rank last week's episode, so I'll do that now. Last week, I think I would have given a low 8, high 7 to... I'm being very vague with the rankings. I gave episode 1 a high 8. I'm giving this a 9. I'm giving this a 9. Verging on a 9/9.5. I really like it, but I want to give some wiggle room for if there's a better episode that comes along later. I was engaged throughout this. There was not a moment I was not on the edge of my seat. There were periods of the time of like the moment where Ryan gets slapped. I was generally like, I held my breath. It was that tense. And all of those moments where you're just... It felt like time stopped because you're just wondering what's going to happen. And I was generally on the edge of my seat. I generally caught my breath a few times while I was waiting to see what happened. There was not a moment of this episode where I was bored. It was a fantastic episode, and I'm really relieved that it went well, because if it had gone badly, I can't think of what the reaction would have been. So I'm really glad it went badly. No, it didn't go badly. I'm really glad it didn't go badly, is what I meant to say there. I forgot prediction corner. Basically, I think Krasko's going to come back. Ryan sent him to the past, and I think that's not the last we've seen of him. Okay, as you were. Yeah, so that's what I thought of the episode. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And, here is some videos. Please do check them out. Do like, share, subscribe and all that jazz. Here's some more of my videos. Do check them out. Last week's review. Something else YouTube thinks I might like. And I'll be back for another review next week. Thank you and goodbye.